What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk about something that YouTube user Chrissy brought up in one of her videos. Alright, so Chrissy did a video very recently about a white passing black female, black woman, African American woman, winning a beauty pageant. And ultimately, in the video, Chrissy wind up, speaking on basically where's the cutoff point when it comes to blackness. Like, where should we draw the line in regards to who's black and who's not black, right? And, I do agree with what Chrissy said. There has to be a cutoff point. I do agree with that. However, I think for me personally, like, I agree that there definitely should be a cutoff point, and I do agree that I don't think that white passing black people probably to an extent should exist. But on the other hand, it's a bit difficult for me to say that, because I do kind of agree with that statement to an extent, but because of like my family and the family I was raised in, the people who are a part of my family, I can't say that in good faith. I can't really stick to that. And I think that's the problem. I think that comes up in a lot of situations when it comes to, like, white passing people, dark skin, light skin, the whole, like, in defining like what's black and what's not black. I think that kind of comes into play because, there are people in the community who, while they may be, say, dark skinned, they may have a light skinned parent. On the flip side, some light skinned people do have dark skinned parents as well. Some light skinned people do have white passing parents, as well as, family members who range from, the darkest of the dark to the lightest of the light, And when it comes to my personal situation, like I said, I have like a lot of family members, immediate family members who are white passing. Like on my father's side, my father himself is white passing. So it's kind of weird for me to say like, oh, there should be a cutoff point, because then it would be kind of like I'm kind of like cutting myself off from my family or distancing myself from my family to an extent, because then my family wouldn't be black. My family would be something else, right? But I know that, that it wouldn't be fair, it wouldn't be right, and it's not cool just to like, oh, but like, oh, my family's the exception, right? That wouldn't be right or fair. And I think that's kind of like the issue when it comes to the cutoff point of who's black and who's not black, because like it's been just so mixed, like everything's been so mixed, it's hard to cut the ties with people, because the ties aren't just like, oh, two dark-skinned people and they have a dark-skinned kid. Like, it's not like that. In fact, like, there's actually some dark-skinned people who have gotten together, and had like a light-skinned child. That actually does happen. Like, I have a buddy who's the product of that. Like, both of his parents are dark-skinned, but he came out light-skinned. YouTube user Lashid, she said like her parents she's like lighter than both of her parents, so that happens too. So that makes things even more complicated, right? It's like, I think that's the issue. It's like so mixed up that it's hard to say what's black and what's not black, because then when you do that, you're kind of like dividing your family to an extent, and distancing yourself from your family, especially when it comes to like your parents and your siblings. Also, like, because sometimes some siblings come out different shades. You know, it's like they could have the same two parents, but one comes out a little lighter or a little darker than the other, you know, but they are, you still consider those people your family though, right? So I think that's the part of the issue when it comes to deciding who's black and who's not black. That's a big part of the issue, I think, really. Um, and I guess I can talk a little bit about my personal situation. You know, in my immediate family, you know, the family that I was raised in, or the household I was raised in, rather, um, I would say like I was raised with my mom, my sister, and my brother. And my sister and my brother have a different father. Like my sister and brother share a father, but I have a different father from my sister and my brother. And in like the immediate family between my mom, sister, and brother, I'm in the lightest, right? So I think that would be a little strange to now say like, oh well, you don't kind of like you're not black, you know, that would be a little strange, right? And also one thing to bring up, right? Oftentimes when it comes to like people who are first generational mix, like say a black parent and a non-black parent, sometimes they do identify as mixed or biracial or multiracial, but sometimes they seem to kind of get like shamed into claiming blackness or forced into claiming blackness. Or sometimes that happens when they encounter particularly like black people and they're like, oh, you know, I'm mixed, I'm biracial, and they were kind of like, some black people will kind of go in and be like, no, the black gene is dominant, your dad's black, then you're black, etc. You know how those conversations go. And I think we as a community kind of have to, and Chrissy mentioned this too, but we can't be like, we can't just, what I want to say, we have to make a choice, kind of like, because it seems like one point black people want to claim mixed people, but then on the other point they get mad when the mixed person starts to kind of get more opportunities than black folks. So I think you just have to make a decision because it's not fair to both people, really. And Soledad O'Brien kind of talked about this for a quick second because it was about, and she was doing like this documentary with I think Dr. Yaba Blay, I think that's her name, like who's black in America or something like that. And she said she had brought this up because like she's, you know, she considers herself black, you know, she's white passing, and she says like, you know, sometimes she gets messages on her Twitter feed like, oh, basically I guess you need to stop passing, but then on the flip side it's like, oh, you need to stop taking opportunities away from black people to it's like both messages, you know. It's like, well, you want me to stop passing but you don't want me to have opportunities. You want me to stop passing and claim a black identity, but you don't want me to actually, I guess, benefit from a black identity. Not too much, I guess, right? But yeah, so I think it's a shared blame. Like, it's enough blame to go around. I think mixed people play their part, black people play their part, white passing people, etc. Like, everyone plays their part, right? You know, and I know this video kind of started off with like white passing people, but I feel like mixed and biracial people, while they may not be white passing, kind of do fit into this as well. And usually, sometimes, like when these conversations come up, I'm like, okay, are they referring to light-skinned people, as in multiracial, mixed people who identify as black and who come from a lineage of black identified people? Or are they referring to first generational mixed people? Or both? Like when these conversations come up, I'm like, okay, because I'm be like, a little bit like a little like what's the word, like skeptical or a little on edge or a little worried when these conversations come up. I'm like, okay, so is someone going to like purge me from the black community now or something? you know um let's see. But to speak a little bit more on, I guess, my familial situation, my father and his family, like the family he grew up in, like pretty much like a couple of people are like kind of like racially ambiguous, but a lot of them, are white passing. Like my grandmother, his mom, like white passing. I say my grandfather is, I'd say, more so racially ambiguous, but also I think he's at one point said, like, when he like entered the Marines, like way back when, like I guess the black dudes was like, why are you here? Basically, like this isn't like you're not, because it was like segregated at that point. The Marines is like, the black Marines are over here, and then the white ones are over here. So he said like that was kind of like the impression, not the impression, but what they basically express. Kind of like, you know, you're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? Like I guess because they didn't think that he was black, right? Um, and also, quick side note, I think my grandfather, I can't say that. My grandfather is actually one of the first black Marines. Not maybe the very first, but definitely one of the first when they first started allowing black men to enter the Marines. And he's also been honored for that, as well as his team, or his I guess his team. I don't know the phrase that they use, but his team has been honored, I think, by President Obama as well. I think it's a Montefort Marines, I believe, something like that. They've been talking about making it into a movie. I'm not sure about that. I don't know all the details about that. But yeah. And I also have a relative, a great uncle who was a Tuskegee Airman as well. I also have a relative on my mom's side who was a part of the civil rights movement. And also lost their life because of being a part of the civil rights movement, right? As well. But to bring it back to this topic, all right, let's bring it back to this topic. All right. So yeah, my father's family dynamics, right? And they were raised in like a black neighborhood too. My grandparents, bought a home in a black neighborhood in Ohio, and that was, they were raised to identify as black. Um, I'm not sure. One of my uncles may have been a passer, or may be passing. I'm not completely sure on that. I haven't found, what's, I guess, the strength or audacity to ask that question. And to an extent, it's not my business, right? Because people do kind of have the right to live their life how they wish, But I guess that's just wondering, But yeah, to bring it back to subject again, right? I already feel like this video gonna be hella long, So if y'all ain't in it to win it, I understand. But if you're in it to win it, I'm gonna go on. All right. But yeah, they were raised in a black neighborhood, right? Had black friends, went to like black churches, et cetera, right? Despite how they look, I think, they were accepted as black, I believe, especially during that time when, that was by law. If you were part black or had some relation to a black person biologically, then you were considered black too, no matter how far that relationship went back, right? um, but yeah, and I'll say like, um, three out of, I say my father and two of his brothers did, marry black women, brown skin, dark skin black women, and have children with them as well. One uncle did kind of, he didn't go that route. He decided to marry white, and that is a choice. No shade, just that's a choice that we all have, right? Um, so I guess where I'm getting at is like people like you were kind of like raised on one hand, you were raised to identify as black, right? So it's kind of weird to like snatch someone's blackness away now at this point, right? Isn't it a little odd at this point, just randomly to like, well, you're not black anymore, right? It says like, excuse me, it says like on my father's birth certificate that like his dad is, at that point they were saying Negro, so like Negro, and his mom is Negro as well. So how could he not be Negro? Like, how you gonna have two Negroes come together and create a white or a mixed child, right? And that doesn't really seem to make sense, right? It's just, that's the thing. It gets really confusing and convoluted, and it becomes a slippery slope when you start to say who's black and who's not black. But I do understand and I do agree that we do need to have a cutoff point at who's black and who's not black. But the problem is, like, where are we going to decide where that cutoff point is? And also, what about the people who have been black their whole lives and are getting cut off? You know? Especially like the older generation where there was no biracial, there was no mixed race, there was no multiracial. It was just colored or Negro, right? They didn't have that option. And I feel like a lot of those white passing people just assume the black identity, right? And also, like, in my family, it's kind of like the elephant in the room to an extent, but I don't think I've ever heard my family ever acknowledge any white heritage or lineage at all. And it's the elephant in the room because it's like so obvious that it's like whiteness in the family. Um, I know how I I know how I identify, but I'm not like, I know who I am. While I know I consider myself black, I identify as black. I do know, obviously, because, even before I did my DNA test, I knew there was going to be a significant portion of non-black DNA. I knew that. And the majority of that non-black DNA was white, was European DNA. It was like 1%, um, Native American, 1% Asian, and then less than 1% Middle Eastern, and the rest, you know, was like 38% white, European, and then 59% African, right? You know, but I say that because, like, in my family, I've never heard anyone talk about like white relatives. I don't even think we have like white relatives that we really know. Like, people who married into the family, but that's another situation. Um, but as far as like white relatives by blood, no, because when you trace it back again, my grandmother's parents, right? They were also light skinned black folks. My grandfather's black parents, on my father's side, right? Also, like, his dad was dark skinned and his mom was really light skinned, white passing, right? So it just gets really confusing because it's been so mixed. The lines have been so mixed and everything's so mixed. It just gets really confusing to, you know, create a point, I guess, to really say what's black and what's not black, right? It becomes a slippery slope, right? But we do have to make that distinction because if we don't, then we'll have like another Rachel Dolezal happen, right? We're gonna have like Paris Jackson trying to come in and culture vote, right? So everyone can't be a part of the black club, right? We have to be exclusive. I do definitely agree with what Chrissy said in her video because we can't just be like an open invitation, just accept anybody, right? That's how we get got, just accepting anybody, right? And black folks have been got too many times, way too many times, right? Too many times. We can't keep getting got. It just looks like we just really dumb, really crazy. It's not a good look. So when you have like, like say like in the case of, let's say, Nick Cannon and Mariah Carey's kids, right? Do you consider Nick Cannon and Mariah Carey's kids to be biracial or multiracial or mixed race? Or do you consider them to be maybe just light-skinned black kids? See, that's part of the issue too. Like, for me, like, would you consider me to be mixed race, biracial, multiracial, based on all the information that I provided you, right? Not based on like, oh, you just looking at me and just making an assumption without the information, right? Based on all the information, how would you classify me, right? And I know like pretty much everywhere else but America, right? Everywhere else is pretty much just, it's defined. It's defined. Like, I know if I were to go to like other countries, my race would probably change, right? Especially if I were to go to like Africa. I'm pretty sure I couldn't go to Africa and claim a black identity or claim an identity that is like African, I know that I couldn't in Africa, right? In Europe, perhaps, although they do give you the option to claim mixed raceness, right? In Latin America, like there's like a lot of different categories. I would probably fall into like the mulatto category, right? As far as Asia, I don't know. Australia, I probably would fall into like some mixed race category there of some sort. Antarctica, I don't know. I'm just joking. So yeah, I think I mentioned all the continents, the Americas, of course, right? So yeah, like you see all this, you see how convoluted this whole conversation is, like, and plus everyone's not on the same page, right? Because some people, like I said, like people do have family members that are not like, all one shade of color. So doing that, you're going to kind of like, separate and break up families to an extent and create divisions within the family. And now it's like, oh, we ain't all black anymore. We got a different race of people and that's a part of our family. And then that could be some tension there, So colorism just will turn into like racism, right? Yeah. It's so crazy, right? It's so complicated. But I guess here's a possible solution that I have. All right. I feel like if you have I say if you have at least one parent first generation who is at least majority black. You know, you can't, I'm not going to say, like, you can't be having like a light-skinned parent and a white parent. You need to have like a black parent and a parent who is at least, I say, you need to at least have a majority black parent, right? You need to have, as a parent, father or mother, a majority black parent. As well, you need to have the look of, you need to have some visible trace of blackness within you. Like, I should be able to look at you and see, like, okay, you know, I see some blackness in you, you know? Because sometimes, you know, keep it real, I do be out and about, and I do kind of look at some people and like, I wonder what race they are. But I kind of can kind of, look at some features like, okay, it seemed like, they looking black, a little ambiguous, check the hair. It's always the hair, right? You know, black folks have a very signature hair texture, right? And that's how, like, a lot of times I kind of, when people be like really ambiguous, I'm like, all right, here, I see you got that texture, that African regal hair, right? Like, very signature to us, That's how like, all right, they come from, the motherland, they got some, direct connections to the motherland, right? But yeah, I can understand, the monoracial black people, the black people who are not ambiguous, having some type of issue, right? They're like, well, no, I'm black and this is what blackness should be, right? But on the other hand, I'm like, well, you can't just use black folks, the light skin and mixed race and white passing black folks when you find it convenient. That's not cool, That's just being like, that's kind of like the equivalent of being like the mixed race person who plays the fence and tries to be black 1 minute and then mixed the next minute and maybe try to be white 1 minute. That's the kind of like the monoracial black equivalent of that, trying to claim mixed people at one point, but then like, no, you can't be mixed today. You can't take these opportunities away from me. But it's like, okay, we got police brutality, we got disenfranchisement. Come on back here. No, you ain't. What? No, you ain't. Like, no, you black. You black. You ain't mixed. No, white folks don't see you as mixed. They see you as, right? Always like, oh, you just another, right? To them, right? They're saying like, oh, you just need to identify as black. But again, I think the cutoff point for blackness, I think if we can be fair about this, right? I feel like, again, you need to have a visible look of some type of look that at least signifies that, okay, you kind of have, I can see some blackness in you, right? You may not be black, the blackest of the black, but I can see something in you, right? So a visible trace of blackness, I do believe that. A strong visible trace of blackness, right? You need to have at least one majority black parent, right? Of course, we're African American, so none of us have like 100% black parents, right? That's just not in the cards, right? For most of us, there probably are a couple of folks who just never mixed it up, but typically, it got mixed up after the one drop rule was implemented. It just got mixed up. And in the case of, like, say, if a white passing person comes into play, I feel like their parent needs to be like majority black, because I don't think you should be having like a biracial or a really light-skinned parent and a white person as your parent while claiming a black identity, a full black identity. And I think mixed race, like mixed biracial and multiracial, I think that probably should be for like the white passing people. That should be their um, what they like their racial category, you know, like, white passing black person or a white passing African American or something like that. That probably should, mix biracial, multiracial, white passing African American, as like their category, you know, while still, if they want to acknowledge that heritage that they do have, you know. And it's not, sometimes it's the parents, how they raise them too. Because sometimes I be hearing some of these parents, and they just really be irking my nerves sometimes, because particularly like these black parents who be swirling and, end up having kids with non-black people, and then want to be like, oh, my child is black. My child ain't mixed, my child ain't biracial, my child black, right? But I'm like, if you wanted a black child, why not have a child with a black person? That seems to make the most sense, right? If you want a black child, why would you go outside of the community to get a black child? Also, why should the community accept your mixed race child and accept you going outside the community to create this mixed race child that you will pawn off on the community as black, and then we'll have to deal with the colorism issues that this offspring perpetuates just their existence in the community, right? So that's my issue that I have with like a lot of, the swirlers who want to swirl and then say like their child or their children are black. It's like, really? Hmm. I like, why we got to deal with this? You notice white folks never have to deal with this. White folks made sure to set it up that they did not have to deal with mixed race and white passing people. Perhaps white passing people, but white passing folks, they just pass and they don't really speak on their blackness, or else folks gonna know they black, So they just know they have to shut up, You can't be talking this blackity black stuff. If you're gonna be white, be white, you know. Thankfully for me, this was never an issue in my family, Thankfully, because my family, like my father's side and my mother's side, all identified as black. So thankfully, I never really had any like issues when it came to identifying myself. I never had like one parent saying one thing and another parent saying another thing. We were like, everyone was all on the same page, right? And that's the thing too. I think sometimes the lines get blurred between light skin and biracial, light skin mixed race and all that stuff. Because there is a while, there are similarities, of course, there are some differences. So, and a lot of times when these conversations come up, as I mentioned before, I'm like, okay, is this referring to mixed people or just all light skin folks? We just want to purge all light skin people, Because I feel like that's kind of like not cool to do. I mean, our some of our leaders, who really, put themselves on the line. A lot of our leaders were light skinned. Of course, not all of them, but we have some significant leaders who are light skinned, right? People who did put in work, who really do consider blackness their identity, full stop. They never claimed any other identity but blackness. They've been down for black people. They have lost their lives for black people of all shades. They weren't just advocating for their shade, they were advocating for the whole community too. So I think that would be a little shady to try and like just purge them from the community at this point, But I could go on for a while for this, but I think I should probably bring this to a close. I want to mention something that is a little off topic, but I guess it kind of relates. I just want to mention this before I go. Someone had brought up in like the comment section of Chrissy's video, one of her videos, not necessarily the white passing video, but one of her videos, they brought up the topic of like, oh, you should do a video about how to avoid light-skinned men who date dark-skinned women as a way to be black, or to be blacker, or to, you know, make a political statement or whatever, I guess. Right? But I noticed that the YouTube user's name was like a dude's name. I kind of thought that question would have came from like a female, but I'm not sure why that question came from a dude. And then, you know, some people were like, oh yeah, you know, you should make a video about that. And then other people were like, well, does that really happen that often? And then one person made a really good point. It was like, well, maybe they're just going back to the blackness, or trying to claim the blackness that they lost, right? Because of, you know, slavery. Because slavery did take away blackness to an extent from some black people, right? So is it a bad thing that they would want their children to be blacker than them? I guess if we view blackness as something negative, then I guess perhaps. Or we view blackness as something that is not worthy, perhaps. So I guess maybe that's where people are coming from when it comes to like lighter skinned people in general and who they date, and you know, them not questioning them about who they date. Like, you know, maybe that light skinned person is just trying to reclaim the blackness that they lost through the generations, right? Perhaps maybe that was what was going on, or a part of the reason for, like, you know, people in my family, right? So it doesn't, that's like a positive way to look at it, because a lot of times people look at it from a negative point of view, like, oh, he's only dating, that light-skinned dude's only dating that dark-skinned girl because she's dark-skinned, and he feels like he's not black, which then kind of creates a whole issue there where it's like, well, is the dark-skinned girl not worthy enough to date just because? Like, you know, like that creates a whole nother topic there, right? But I'm going on for long enough. My bad. But I warned you. I know I warned you like 15 minutes in, but I warned you, all right? So if you got to the end, I really appreciate it, and you know, thanks a lot. Feel free to leave a comment on this situation, because it's so nuanced and so many layers to this, right? Again, thanks for watching. Adios and goodbye for now.